we have the U.S. Consul from the American Embassy and the Vice Consul. And we're going to address, it's an information session, but we'll be addressing questions that you may have as either American citizens or questions about non-immigrant visas, particularly the J visa, the short-term visa for study in the United States. So all of that will be taking place in just a moment. And we wanted also to say that this service is sometimes we do it as part of the 3-day or week-long orientation at the beginning of the semester, but this time we decided it will be done later on. So at this time, esteemed guests, I'd like to introduce Lisa Vickers, who is the Consul General of the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. Lisa is from, is it Vallejo or Vallejo?
Vallejo.
Vallejo, California. And she came to Cairo after serving in Frankfurt, Germany. She assumed her role in Cairo in August of 2017, so she's been here for a year. And she travels frequently around the country on consular outreach trips, speaking to Americans who live, work, or study in Egypt to hear how she can better work together with them. And she is also, obviously, for us, a very important source of information as we need to be better prepared as students when we apply for a visa to go to the United States on short-term or longer-term opportunities. And with Consul General Vickers is Vice Consul Susan Copeland, who has just come to Cairo. She's only been here for 2 months, and she's joined the consular section in the American Citizen Services section. And this is her second tour. We're very excited to have her with us, and we give them both a warm welcome. As then we ask Consul Lisa Vickers to come to the podium, and we're going to switch the screens. Reda? The Shesha? Screen? Right, the Shesha. Okay.
There we go.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? It's a pleasure to be here. You have an absolutely lovely campus, and this is the first time I've been here, so it's a real delight for me to be here this afternoon. I hope you don't mind that I took off my jacket because it's a little warm, and I don't necessarily want this to be so formal. So I understand that George will be collecting questions that I will be answering, and of course I welcome all of you to ask any questions you might have, both about student visas or other types of visas, as well as for the American citizens here. If you have questions about things like voting, or other questions that you might have about the services that our American Citizen Services Unit can provide, we are here to try to answer those questions. So I am not a PowerPoint whiz, so I will warn you now. It could be a little sketchy, but here we go. All right, I'm going to show you a couple of rather large, colorful graphics, but I want to give you a sense of what it is that we do as a consular service both worldwide, as well as what we do in Cairo. So just to give you a little idea, one statistic that always strikes me is anytime somebody travels to the United States, that one person traveling to the United States creates 9 jobs in the United States. That's something to really think about. Tourism for the United States economy is very important. And so consequently, we want people to come to the US. And of course, for my fellow Americans in the crowd, to know us is to love us. One of the best ways to get to know Americans and to get to know the United States is to come to our country, get to know us, and see what our country's all about. And it's hard to do that sometimes from far away. A few other interesting statistics. 21 million passport services every year. These statistics were as of last year. We work on preventing fraud. We help US businesses overseas find markets, and as well as to increase trade between the US and countries around the world. So these are some statistics that talk about consular affairs from a worldwide perspective, but what about here in Cairo? So these are some statistics for us. Last year, we issued over 40,000 visas. So anyone that tells you that we don't issue visas, that's not true. And in fact, I'm going to show you a statistic in a little while that'll tell you how many Egyptian students are studying in the United States. And that number is 3,700. We also are working on facilitating development and investment. We are also looking to grow the economy. And collectively, in our consular section, our officers have 95 years of experience. I myself have 28 years of experience in the Foreign Service. I joined in 1990 and have served in 11 different postings. So I have quite the breadth of experience. And I am a consular officer by profession, and I'm very proud of what I do. But let's talk a little bit about student visas, shall we? During the previous school year, there were over 1 million international students in the United States, and as I said, 3,700 of them were Egyptian. Student visas and students going to the United States are a demographic that we want to attract. Universities want international students to attend because you bring something to the United States that we can't get any other way. We want students to increase the diversity on campuses, to talk about their home countries and where they're from, to participate in language programs, and basically to create an environment on a campus where everyone is learning a little bit of something about a lot of other people. If I had not been an international exchange student myself, I probably wouldn't be in the Foreign Service. So I can certainly recognize the value in studying abroad, not only for international students, but American students as well. Now, the next question I know I'm going to get, so I'll just go ahead and answer it now, is how do I apply for a student visa? How many of you in the audience are interested in applying to study in the United States? Okay, so about half the group. And because you're all students here, you're thinking about this possibly as part of your major, or because you're studying something here that going to a university in the United States for a while might enhance your learning, or perhaps you're looking at a graduate program. Whatever it is that you're planning to do or hope to do in the future by studying in the United States, this is the process of how you go about it. First of all, to apply for a visa interview, you go online to our website. I cannot stress one thing enough: apply early. If you know that you are hoping to go to the fall semester at any university in the United States, most universities start their fall semesters in either August or September. They usually have some sort of an induction program when you first arrive. I would highly recommend that you start looking at applying for your visa in June. May even, if you've gotten your SEVIS paperwork already, which is the paperwork the university sends you. The earlier you apply, the better, because that way it's just one less thing for you to have to worry about. When you're going overseas to study, there are 1,000,001 little things that you have to do, and getting your visa is just one of those million little things. So the earlier you start on that process, the better. As well, before your interview, you should bring these documents with you. Your application, which is the DS-160. Perhaps we should spell that out because I don't expect all of you to know what our form numbers are. The I-20 or the DS-2019, which is the form that you'll get from your university stating that you are going to pursue a particular course of study. You will sign up to ustraveldocs.com. You'll have your SEVIS registration and payment, and of course, most importantly, a photo. Now, again, one thing I will stress about your photo, please don't Photoshop it. We love you, warts and all, and we want to see you, warts and all. So no glasses and no Photoshopping, please, because we'll just make you get us another picture. And amazingly enough, yes, we can tell. But we want you to come and apply. And in fact, my officers will be out talking a little bit more specifically about applying for student visas. And our American corners at the embassy actually can provide information on universities in the United States and study programs that might be of interest. And I'm willing to bet that AUC has a very robust office that also does exactly that. So when you are thinking about studying abroad, we encourage you to think about that. We want you to come to the United States as a student or as a tourist at some point, so that you can see the United States for yourself if you haven't been there already. Now, George also mentioned that I have Susan with me. Susan and I are going to tag team a little bit on the American Citizen Services portion of what we're going to talk about. And I'd like to leave a fair amount of time for questions, because frankly, that's the most important part of any presentation, is being able to ask your questions. So moving on, these are some of the things that we can do as an American Citizen Services unit. We can issue you a passport. If you have a child overseas, we can register that child and give that child an American birth certificate, provided they qualify for that, but that's another technical thing. If you get sick and you need assistance, you need to know if there's a hospital near you or if there's a doctor, we can provide that information for you. It's listed on our website. And I actually visit hospitals all over the country just to get an idea of the quality of services that can be offered. We don't recommend any one over another, but we can certainly tell you what a given hospital offers as far as its technical expertise. Sadly, sometimes we have to help people who have passed away while overseas, either long-term residents who, as a result of age or illness have passed away, or people who've been involved in accidents. And we provide an American death certificate, and we also help send the person home to their family. And we can facilitate all of those sorts of things. We do notaries. For example, if you are planning on getting married in Egypt, you have to have a certificate of non-impediment, and we are your one-stop shop to get that document certified so that you can get married. And finally, we will visit you in jail. But I am certain, we don't want to, I am certain that not a single one of you in here is ever going to require that service of us. But should you need to, should you unfortunately come to the attention of the Egyptian law enforcement, then we can visit you in jail. We cannot act as your attorney, we cannot act as your travel agent, and we cannot act as your mother, but there are a lot of other things that we can do and do on a regular basis for American citizens. But now I'm going to let Susan talk about voting.
So as you know, I'm sure we have midterm elections coming up in the United States. And so for U.S. citizens, it is possible to vote from overseas. It's getting a little close to midterms, so I suggest if you haven't already, visit this fvap.gov website. This is the one website that will cover everything, what you need to do to vote from overseas. So every state has different requirements. If you're from California or Georgia or Hawaii, you'll have different deadlines and different process for getting your ballot and returning the ballot. So fvap.gov will walk you through the process of determining what the requirements are for your state. Once you have received your ballot by following the fvap.gov, we can help you return it to the United States. So lead time is about 14 to 21 days, so keep that in mind. And every state, again, will have a different deadline. Most of the deadlines are actually after the election. Maybe it has to be received within 3 days of the election or something, but postmarked before the election, again, depends on the state. but you can bring your ballot to the embassy and we will mail it for you. So it must carry correct postage, or you can print a postage paid envelope at fvap.gov that you can bring it to the embassy, or perhaps I'll speak with George maybe. I think in the past we've collected ballots here at AUC. So that would be a lot easier, I know, if we could collect them here and then return them once. So we'll try to work something out with that.
And if you have never registered to vote, you can always do that when you are overseas. If you are an American citizen, voting is a right and a privilege. And I highly encourage all of you to vote in every election, midterm or not. But you are able to vote and you are able to register even if you are abroad, even if you've never voted before. And you can do that through that website.
That's it. fvap.gov is your website for voting. So, and midterms are very important this year, so we would love to have some ballots coming in from AUC. All right.
You like that?
I can.
Okay. So, travel advisories. I'm sure most of you have visited travel.state.gov. We love to talk about TSG, that's what we call it. It's a great website. It has lots of information. You may have seen that Egypt is a level 2, which means exercise increased caution. The State Department uses this color-coded and number system. However, do you know what other countries are also twos? Look at all of Europe. We're not telling people not to come to Egypt. We encourage people to come to Egypt. We live in Egypt. We love it here. And I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that, I mean, look at all of the world that is also yellow. So we are not, the State Department has not made any, has not given Egypt a really, we are encouraging American citizens. We provide common sense travel guidance like we do for all of the world.
The blue stars, by the way, are embassies, and the red stars are consulates, just in case you're wondering. But in case you want to see it without all the little blue and red stars, conveniently, the university produces in their safety and security brochure. If you haven't seen this, it's right there. I was delighted to see this today because this is exactly the kind of information that we like to see. And when I talk to tourism professionals here in Egypt, we talk all the time about the fact that they love American tourists and they want American tourists to come back. And we are coming back in droves. And it's because Egypt, and particularly Upper Egypt, is a great place to visit. This is an amazing country with so much to offer. And we want Americans to come and experience it.
And I have some handouts of the exact travel advisory if anyone needs it. But again, the main guidance is to stay away from border areas, the North Sinai, and the Western Desert. Those are really the only areas that the U.S. government recommends that U.S. citizens do not travel in Egypt. And the STEP program. So I think that I've heard that somebody here at AUC is really on top of it and helps the students register with STEP. If you have not registered for STEP already, step.state.gov. This program will allow you to get any alerts that the embassy sends out. The U.S. government has a no double standard policy, so U.S. citizens in country are getting the exact same information that I and Lisa as government employees are getting. We don't have any kind of secret information at the embassy. We put everything out there for the public, and if you register at step.state.gov, you can get it right on your iPhone. And as Lisa was saying, so we do kind of in American Citizen Services, we really have two areas. We have emergency services and routine services. If you do need to register for, if you lose your passport, you can register for a passport appointment through this website. If it's a real emergency, if it's lost, been stolen, you're traveling immediately and you need a new passport, you can also email this address and explain your situation, and we can try to get you in for a much sooner appointment. It is possible for us to issue same-day passports if the circumstances require. Again, notaries, birth certificates, anything routine will be on this side over here. Now, emergencies, arrest, assault, deaths, anything obviously that you would consider emergency, please call this number. That's the embassy switchboard, and they will connect you. We have somebody on duty 24 hours, 7 days a week that you can speak to and explain your situation. And we will let you know what we can, if we are able to help and how we can help.
that's the end of our PowerPoint presentation. So now let's move on to the Q&A. So George has collected all of your questions, and he will be asking us, and we will be answering.
Okay, well, I actually need to ask, I haven't actually collected the questions, but I'd be happy to do that at this moment. There's also a registration card inside the folder that you have been given along with the Consul General Vickers' bio. And so I will be able to be happy to take those questions from you. They can be either about American services or about visas. Rhonda, could I have some at this point that I can start while you're getting the others?
I'm sure I'll get a question about this, but I'll just go ahead and answer it just to be on the safe side. Some of you may be aware that the United States has what we call a diversity visa lottery program. How many of you have heard of the diversity visa lottery? Oh, not as many as I would have expected. We will be running the lottery again in October. We will be putting out information about how to apply at the beginning of October, and the application period starts October 4th. So pay attention if you don't sign up for our Facebook, if you're not on our Facebook page, there will be a lot of information there. Also on our website, on our Twitter feed, and on Instagram.
Okay, so thank you. So I have a couple questions already about the voting process, and I'll start with those. Any advice on how to vote if your mailing address in Egypt is unreliable?
So most states, I don't know what exact state we're talking about, and I actually do not have all 50 states' requirements memorized yet. But most states can send you a ballot by email or by fax. Other than that, we'll see. I don't know how we would return.
I do.
You do? Okay. Please, Lisa.
And I've had to do this myself. If your ballot doesn't arrive in time.
Oh, that's right.
For example, I'm a California voter, and my ballot came by email this week, so I will be voting this weekend and faxing it back. But not every state has those kinds of requirements. Some states require notarization. If your ballot does not arrive on time, we can give you a write-in ballot, and it can be filled out. You can also get it from the website, the fvap.gov. You can print out a write-in ballot. It is good for any state. You fill in the information and you can send it back. So if you know that your ballot, and let's be honest, sometimes mailing addresses, even in the United States, are unreliable. So if you don't get your ballot in time and it's about a week before the election, go ahead and print out the write-in ballot and fill it out and send it in.
I think it's called the federal absentee ballot.
It is the federal absentee write-in ballot. Okay.
So that has answered the second question, which was about voting absentee in the elections, I believe. A third question is about evacuation procedures, and is the embassy involved in those?
Absolutely. That's primarily what our responsibility is. Foreign diplomats overseas, American diplomats in particular, have two main responsibilities. The first is the care of American citizens abroad, and the second is to facilitate American business. So when there should be an emergency requiring evacuation, that's why it's important to sign up for STEP. Because if we are in a position to evacuate American citizens, you will be notified via STEP. We will also be sending out blast emails and putting it on Facebook, getting that information out far and wide, should that be an issue. There were evacuations in 2011 and 2013, so this is not in the far past that we've had to do this. And we do crisis management exercises all the time at the embassy, preparing for all kinds of things, not just political unrest or terrorism, but also plane crashes, cruise boat fires, or incidents at schools. So pretty much any awful thing you can think of, we've probably prepared for it at some point or another.
Thank you. Next question is about the diversity lottery. If you apply to the diversity lottery, does it affect any non-immigrant visa applications?
No.
That was easy.
We assume, let me amplify that a bit. We assume that people may be taking their chances on the diversity visa lottery, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are also not legitimate tourists or students. So if somebody asks during your visa interview if you have applied for the lottery, please be honest and say yes. You will be joining about 1 million other people in the country that have as well. Egypt is the second most populous country for the diversity visa, and we're not going to hold that against you, especially if your purpose of travel to the United States is to study or some other legitimate purpose.
Good. Okay, that answered the other question about how does Egypt compare to other countries in terms of numbers of diversity visas.
See, I'm prescient.
That you are. The next question is, again, going back to voting, how does living in Egypt affect state residency requirements for voting?
So normally it's your last state of residence. If you've never lived abroad, never lived in the United States, there are different rules. Again, fvap.org has a voting assistant online that will walk you through the process of determining what your state of residence is for voting purposes.
Great.
Generally, if your parents lived in, let's say, New York before you moved overseas, you can use that last address in New York as your voting residence. If you have aunts or uncles that live in the United States, you can use their address to establish a voting residence.
Some questions about visas now. Can I apply for both a student visa and a tourist visa at the same time?
Yes, and we actually encourage you to do so. The student visa will be good for the length of the time that you are a student for whatever your course of study in the United States is. We customarily issue 5-year multiple entry visas for tourism. And if you already have a visa, for example, and it's about to expire, you can renew your visa through the mail rather than having to actually come in. So I also encourage you or your family members, if the visa is expired or is about to expire within the last year, you can use our interview waiver program, and you can just drop them off in the mail. We'll renew them and send them back to you.
What are the most common reasons for visa delays for J1 visas?
Well, there's lots of reasons there can be delays. If a student doesn't receive their DS 2019 in time, that can certainly delay the issuance of the visa. If there is administrative processing, this is why I'm encouraging people to apply early. If you are subject to administrative processing, and I couldn't tell you just by looking at your passport or your visa application if that would be required, unless you're studying something very specific, like nuclear engineering, for example, will require administrative processing. We require that worldwide. But for the most part, the only delays that would come about would be either your paperwork hasn't been received, we need a new photo, again, no photoshopping. We are waiting for some other information from you, like proof that you have the finances to pay for your time in the United States, or you are subject to some sort of administrative processing. We do try to keep in mind that if your school year starts in the beginning of September and you do have administrative processing, we do try to do what we can to make sure that you don't miss the first days of school. We can't promise anything, which is of course why we encourage you to apply early.
Can you talk a little bit about the things that the embassy in Cairo has no control over in terms of things like administrative processing? Because AUC was, I think at one point under the impression, or students were, that there was an expedited process for AUC students to get visas. And I want all the students to, because they continually ask me, don't you have a hotline to the U.S. Embassy? So I want to make it clear to students what you're able to do and what you're not able to do.
There is no hotline, I'm sorry to say. There's no red phone that rings on my desk that allows me to expedite cases, unfortunately. And believe me, you're not the only ones that ask. Generally, the best advice we can give you is to apply early. If you're going on a J visa program, for example, sometimes you're not allowed to travel to the United States until a month before your program starts. Your visa will be good for long enough to allow for that, both for the month ahead of time and what some people may not be aware of is if you've gone on an exchange program, you're also allowed a month on the back end to do some tourism before your visa expires. Something else to explain that people often don't understand, and I didn't understand it myself until I got into this business. The length of validity on your visa is only if it's a multiple entry 5-year, you can enter for the course of 5 years as many times as you like. The Customs and Border Patrol will determine how long you can stay. If you're going for a student program, they will generally allow you to stay for the length of time of your program. But there isn't really a way to expedite a student visa if it requires admin processing. We really require that people apply at least 2 weeks and generally a month before you plan to travel. It's frankly just good practice.
A question about the interviewing process. Do I need to prepare for my interview, or should I just be able to go and talk?
The most important thing I can tell you about your interview is relax. You're talking to people like Susan and I, and we love students. We love to talk to students. I could talk to students all day. So if you're coming in for your visa interview and you're maybe a little nervous, that's normal. What we want to know from you is, what are you planning to study? What are you studying here? What year are you in school? How long is your program in the United States? If your program requires you to speak English, we're going to interview you in English. But what we really want you to do is tell us what you're going to do. You're going to be excited about going to spend either a year or a semester abroad in the United States. We want you to be able to express that excitement to us. Tell us what you're going to study. If it's something that's a little different than what you are studying right now, perhaps this is an opportunity to maybe take a slight lateral on what you're studying and do something a little bit different. Tell us about that. Why are you doing that in particular? Why did that appeal to you? These are the kinds of questions we're going to ask. We're also going to want to know, how are you going to pay for it? If your parents are going to pay for it, then you should be able to demonstrate that to us. If you've gotten scholarships from the university, tell us about that too. At the end of the day, this is a conversation. We don't really want to see a lot of pieces of paper. We want to hear from you what you're going to do. And if you can tell us what your course of study is and what your plan is, then the interview should be just fine.
Great. We have students on various programs, and some of whom are here from other countries, so they're not Egyptian, but they do go on study abroad. So they're not American, they're not Egyptian. And we want to know, one question is particularly about students from countries on the list of restricted visas. Are there carve-outs? What are the options for those students?
As a result of the presidential proclamation and the executive order, there are some countries for whom we cannot automatically issue visas. Of course, Egypt is not part of that, but there are other countries where there may be students studying here who are affected by those two things. It may mean that the visa will take a long time to issue. It may require a different processing from Washington for us. And I'm sorry, unfortunately, I can't really give you a good answer about that. You are still welcome to apply in Cairo, and we will still interview you as if you were at home. But we are bound by the presidential proclamation and the executive order.
And the next question is about events and seminars that the embassy runs, if any.
We actually have an American Corners that is in our embassy, and if you've never been there, it's a library, and they have programming all the time. They do a variety of different types of things. We would recommend that you sign up because often we have tickets for musical groups that come to town from the United States or movie premieres that we are offering. There are all kinds of things that we're doing at different times. For example, we're sponsoring a film at the Guna Film Festival, so we'll be down there for that. We also do film screenings here in Cairo, and I understand that President Riccardoni would love us to use some of AUC's downtown facilities for some of our programming, and we're certainly excited to pursue that opportunity.
Okay, that was very quick and smooth, and we want to thank you. I think we've got students have classes at 2, so we want to probably wind up. I'd like to thank our guests for coming out here, Consul Vickers and Vice Consul Copeland. And I'd like to thank students and the interns and the faculty and the staff who came and joined us for this session. And Alia, I know you may want to sit back, to remain for about 5 minutes, if you could. Sure. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.